Is the tide finally turning in this abbreviated election season? The honeymoon phase for Harris and Walz seems to be over. Walz is being accused of stolen valor and much more. Harris may finally have to face some tough questions about her very radical policy positions. So we're going to get into that today, as well as a message for Christians who just feel demoralized by this election, the candidates that we've got. It's just a reminder of why politics really does matter and why we really don't have the option to be apathetic. Also, make sure that you are signed up for Share the Arrows. If you are a Christian woman, sharethearrows.com. We have amazing speakers. This is a day of edification, encouragement, equipment for the Christian woman. It's in Dallas, Texas on September 28th. If you go to sharethearrows.com, you can find all of the information on it there and you can sign up. It's going to be amazing. Come by yourself, come with your friends. I am so excited about this, and it's really soon. And we might have more speakers that I'm announcing possibly soon. So stay tuned for that. Go to sharethearrows.com. And if you're already signed up, check your email. We have a really fun surprise for all of you who have already bought your tickets. Sharethearrows.com. All right, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Good Ranchers. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Allie at checkout. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. It looks and sounds different because I am in a different location and will be for a couple episodes every week. A couple episodes will be in our typical studio location. Will look and sound the way that you are used to it looking and sounding, and then a couple episodes a week will look and sound like this. So bear with us if there are some noise differences. If there's a sound difference, we are doing our best working with what we have in a different location for these next few weeks. All right, it's Monday, which means we are diving into the election and we are looking at the Harris-Walz ticket and who they really are. The fact of the matter is we are not getting a full and fair picture of these candidates because the media wants Harris and Walz to win. It's really not more complicated than that. They are left-leaning, increasingly unabashedly so, and so they want you to think positive things, exclusively positive things about Harris and Walz, and exclusively negative things about Trump and Vance. However, there's some positive news, I think, right off the top, and this is really just more my subjective perspective than anything else. But I do think that the honeymoon phase of the Harris-Walz ticket, the announcement of her presumptive nomination as well as his, that it is fading. I think it took a second for the Trump campaign and just in general the conservative side to kind of understand what we're working with and what we're up against. I think that the strategy against Biden was very easy and very straightforward. And Kamala Harris, to her credit, she's a little bit more of a challenge. I think that we can all be honest with that. And you all have seen her campaign's digital footprint and how she has tried to, and the media has tried to really manufacture excitement for her ticket. I think some of it is genuinely organic, and I think a lot of it is not. I think a lot of it really is created by the media, so it has this kind of contagious effect. But that is what it is. That's what we're up against. It's what we've been up against for a long time. When you have media, Hollywood, academia, when you have most of big tech, and you have the public education system, as well as many more national and global entities all in the bag for the Democratic ticket. Yeah, we've got a long road ahead. We've got an uphill climb. But that's what it's been for a while now. We can complain all we want to, but those are the challenges that we face. And to Team Trump's credit, I do feel like they are finally kind of getting their feet under them and understanding the aggressiveness that is required in running the right race. Now, from my vantage point, I think that there could be major improvements. I mean, there are a lot of commentators out there giving the Trump team advice, and they can't take all the advice because some of the advice is competitive. It's contradictory. And I hope, though, that they will take to heart what people like what people like Charlie Kirk and others have said about not forgetting about the importance of the white evangelical vote and to not take that for granted. Because the truth is that there are at least 2 to 3%, if not 5%, of evangelicals who voted for Trump the last two times who now are demoralized by this campaign for a variety of reasons, but mostly because of the abortion comments. And it seems to me like the Trump campaign is really trying to play towards the middle. They really want those secular independents who maybe aren't so excited about men and women's sports, but in general, they're pro-LGBTQ, who didn't love all of the COVID policy, but in general are still supportive of the left-wing kind of health apparatus, who might not be for abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, but probably somewhere around the 4 to 6 month mark. They're really vying for those votes. And I get it. You have to get as many votes as possible, but you also have to do so in a way that does not sell out your base, that doesn't make your base feel like a cheap date. Because I'm telling you right now, there are evangelicals who are saying, look, I'm not going to reward a pro-choice candidate with my vote. And that can make or break this election. I do see the Trump campaign trying to also vie for the Black vote. And in particular, the Black female vote. You can see by some of the people that he has platformed at his rallies that is a vote that he wants. And again, I understand trying to get every vote possible, but we just have to we just have to reckon with reality for a second that the Black women who will vote for Donald Trump, because there are Black women who will vote for Donald Trump, they don't care about the identity politics thing. They're not voting because of skin color. They're not voting because they see someone that looks like them up on stage at a rally. They're voting based on policies, based on their values. And anyone who is going to vote because of the color of skin of someone that they see on a stage, all of those people are voting for Kamala Harris. Every single one of them. So I think that your attention, your money, your resources do not need to be dedicated in that direction. They need to be dedicated to winning back that 2 to 3% at least of Christians who previously supported Trump, who feel like they cannot now. Or even if they are voting for Trump, they are not enthusiastically voting for Trump. And that matters because that means that they do not feel the conviction to tell the other people around them, hey, it's really important that you vote for Donald Trump. Because here's what Team Trump needs to understand. Is that to the conservative evangelical, to the Christian, the pro-life Christian, there is no moral difference between abortion at 16 weeks and abortion at 40 weeks. Yes, of course, it seems more barbaric because the procedure is more invasive, it is more involved, and just the thought of aborting a child at 36 weeks, of course, for all of us, that gives us a sense of revulsion, as it should. However, that child is not any more of a child and is therefore is no more valuable than the child at 16 weeks or even the child at 8 weeks. And so hearing someone like Donald Trump, who has done a lot for the pro-life cause in nominating the right justices, being the first president to attend a March for Life while he was president, it is extremely demoralizing. It's extremely demoralizing. You are at the very least watering down evangelicals' enthusiasm for Donald Trump when you throw out a number like 16 weeks, when you say things like follow your heart. Trump was at the Turning Point USA Believers Summit a few weeks ago, and he used this same language, following your heart. And he got booed. And look, that is just not the language to use. It's not publicly. What I would say, if anyone from Team Trump is listening, and I have the podcast that probably has the most numerically as well as just the highest concentration of evangelical women, and And so I have my finger on the pulse, at least somewhat. I don't pretend to know everything about this demographic, but I know a lot about this demographic. And so you can take this for what it's worth. I would say either stop talking about abortion. Do not say anything about 16 weeks. Do not say anything about follow your heart. That is so language that is completely and totally like repulsive to like the Christian woman. We don't believe in following your heart, first of all, just like as a theological issue, but especially when it comes to abortion, like that's what we've been hearing from the pro-choice side forever, that a woman just needs to follow her heart and do what she wants to do, even if it means killing her child. So please don't say that anymore. And then also, if you're going to talk about it, you don't have to get into the nitty-gritty of policy, okay? Say something like, look, I'm on the side of life. I was on the side of life when I was president. I'm on the side of life now, and I will promote life. And I will do everything I can to promote life for people outside of the womb and everything I can to promote life for people inside the womb. Leave it at that. And let the nitty-gritty of the policy conversation be left to other people. You understand, and I know that Trump does understand this, and I think JD Vance definitely understands this. You don't have to answer the questions that are being asked of you. And so when they try to nail you down on like what would be the limit, what would it look like, tell me exactly what you think about the Protecting Life Amendment that has been proposed by some pro-lifers and pro-life organizations, you don't have to answer. You just say, look, I'm on the side of life. And we should all be on the side of life. It's absolutely barbaric that my opponent believes in abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason paid for by the tax dollar. And you can point to her legislative record as senator, even as Attorney General of California, to prove that that is true. She voted against the Born Alive Infant Survivors Protection Act, which was not a restriction on abortion. It was introduced by Ben Sasse, and it simply said, while Kamala Harris was in the Senate, it simply said that, look, you got to provide health care to babies who survive abortions. They can't just be left to die, which is something that happens, as we've talked about routinely, unfortunately, in this country. It's happened in the state of Minnesota under Governor Walz's watch because of the policies that he has promoted, as Charlie Kirk has reported. So that's what Trump can point to. Like, you don't even have to give a policy proposal. You point to the barbarism of your opponents, and then you point to your record on life. And you can be vague about that, but start promoting life. Like that, and that alone will give some assurance to pro-lifers that you're not going to sell them out. No more follow your heart language. No more talking about 16 weeks. I promise you, the pro-lifers that are even voting for you now will not support that when you are in office. And by the way, the pro-choicers won't support it either. So you're making absolutely no one happy. I understand that there are some people in the middle who abortion is like their issue and they have to vote for someone who is pro-choice. I would not pander to those people. I see a lot of movement in the Republican Party to try to pander to what I call that mushy middle of like secular LGBTQ activist, barstool, conservative kind of people who kind of like Donald Trump, and they'll probably vote Republican, but they don't really have any, conservative foundation. It seems to me like the Trump wing of the GOP really wants to appeal to those people. Again, I understand getting their votes, but also you need to understand about that demographic is that they are extremely mushy and they are extremely fickle. They're extremely fickle. Like one day you'll have Dave Portnoy talking about, oh my gosh, Trump is so awesome for, getting shot at and raising his fist, and the left is so crazy and blah, blah, blah. And then the next day he'll be talking about what a quote unquote moron JD Vance is. Like those people, they scare really easily. They spook really easily. If you say one thing that they think is a little bit too Christian and a little bit too self-righteous, they'll abandon you. So trying to cater almost exclusively to that independent middle, it is not a winning strategy. Talking about how radical your opponent is, because this ticket is absolutely radical. They have so many moral, personal failings too, so many lies that you can point to. I think that is the direction to go. And to just bring it back to what I was saying at the beginning, I do see Trump Vance starting to do that really well. All right, quick pause to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Carly Jean Los Angeles. They've got an amazing deal going on right now. I have been telling y'all for years about the denim at Carly Jean Los Angeles. My favorite jeans ever. I mean, I have jeans from, I think, everywhere because I'm always looking for jeans that are flattering and that are comfortable, that give a little bit without stretching out throughout the day to where they look baggy by evening. That's the jeans. Those are the jeans from Carly Jean Los Angeles. They have the perfect amount of stretch and they never lose their shape. It's actually incredible. I have no idea how they do it. And they have all different kinds of styles and shapes for whatever your body type is. I think I've worn all different types of CJLA jeans while I've been pregnant, while I've been postpartum, while I've been neither of those things. They really do have a pair for every stage of life, every season of the year. They've got an amazing BOGO deal right now. You can buy one, get one free. So 2 pairs of jeans for the price of one. That's like an insane deal. All you got to do is go to carlyjeanlosangeles.com. Use code Allie's Free Jeans. Allie's Free Jeans. If you've never bought their jeans before, you can get this amazing BOGO deal. carlyjeanlosangeles.com. Code Allie's Free Jeans. JD Vance did a round of interviews with the major networks this weekend. And if you only saw commentary from the left, you heard, oh my gosh, he embarrassed himself. He got destroyed. That is such a laughable lie. If you go on X and you watch any of the clips with JD Vance and, for example, Dana Bash, he is so good. Like, he is so articulate and he's very aggressive in those interviews. I think that's great. Like, I think that we need that kind of aggression. That's what people loved, for example, about Ron DeSantis when he was kind of sparring with the media. People loved that, ate that stuff up. People still love it. With JD Vance, the reaction from conservative X was incredible in support of him. We need more of that, while also showing, because you can do both at the same time, that you are a warrior when it comes to the press, when it comes to pushing back against the left, when it comes to correcting lies, and this soft, lovable, relatable family man at home who is a beloved husband and a dad to 3 kids that he adores. And Trump can also do the same thing. That's something I really love about Trump, is that I really do believe that he is this soft-hearted family guy who adores his grandchildren and who also really wants to fight for America to be the best that it can be. That doesn't mean that I always like the things that he says. It doesn't mean I always agree with his policy prescriptions. That's for sure. I've talked about that several times. But I genuinely believe that's what he is. And this is the great thing, is that I think that if their campaign just shows who they are, both sides of them, that they really do have an appeal to the average American. The difference between them and Walz and Harris is that you have to actively lie about who Harris is, who Walz is, when you talk about them to make them relatable. Now, lucky for them, they've got the mechanisms to do that and the money to do that, the celebrity to do that, the media coverage to do that. And all we can do on our side is to try to tell the truth as much as possible, to try to push our perspective of things, which of course also includes opinion, as much as possible. And that's really all we can do. In addition, of course, to praying and believing that God is completely and totally sovereign, that this election is not a surprise to him. He's not wondering who's going to win. He's not waiting to see if all the ballots are going to get counted. He's not worried at all. Like, let's remember that he's not surprised. He's not taken aback. And our anxiety and our concern about what's going to happen, which it's valid to have an amount of concern about our country and our children's future. But let us remember that at the end of the day, Jesus is totally victorious, that his win is absolutely sure, and that he's coming back and we're not going to have politics anymore one day. However, and here's what I want to say to Christians who use that as like a fallback to just not care, is that we still occupy this physical space. And God has not placed us here arbitrarily. He's not put us here accidentally. He didn't just say, oh, you know what? I kind of need to fill some space down there. Here's this random person at this random time. No, he placed you on this tiny spot of eternity, in this tiny speck in this grand universe right now for a reason. That's true of your children. That's true of your children's children, and so on. None of that is accidental. Every single bit of it is purposeful and providential. And he placed us here for his glory. And part of giving him glory, as we see so clearly articulated throughout Scripture, is loving our neighbor, making the world around us better. That is the history of the church, by the way. Every country that we are placed in, every city, every community that we are placed in, we try to beautify. We try to make better. We try to meet the needs of others. We try to maximize the resources that are given to us for the glory of God and the good of other people. Part of that, as people who live in the United States, we are exiles in this world, but we are citizens in the temporal, physical sense of the United States, which means that we have not only the responsibility, but the opportunity to maximize and beautify the space that we are in through political engagement. That is a way to love our neighbor. That is not the primary way. That is not the exclusive way to love our neighbor, but that is a way to love our neighbor. Why? Those of you who have been listening to my podcast for several years, you've memorized this phrase. Politics matter because policy matters, because people matter. Politics affects policy, policy affects people, and people matter. They matter to God as his image bearers, and they matter to us because they matter to God. And so that's why we have to care, because policies, whether it's the border, whether it's drug policy, it's crime policy, it's abortion policy, it's economic policy, these have a real effect on people. They have a real effect. You're feeling it on you. Inflation has a real effect on your life and on your children's life, on your security. Lawlessness in the street, that has a real effect on your life. Policies tend to affect the most vulnerable predominantly and primarily. And so if we care for the most vulnerable, which all Christians are called to do, one way to care about them is to advocate for policies that are best. That doesn't mean that we have to only think about one set of people. Every policy is about trade-offs. Remember that. Every policy has trade-offs. But we have to think about how policies affect them. And the left loves to talk about how they are standing in the stead for the marginalized and for the vulnerable. That's actually why you hear a lot of Christians say that they are going to vote Democrat, because they are voting for policies that take care of the poor, that take care of the least of these, that take care of those who can't defend themselves and can't speak up for themselves. And then you have some people saying, well, yeah, see, that's true. The left really wants to care for the least of these. That's why they vote Democrat. And that's a justification for some Christians to vote Democrat. And really, Christians who vote Republican, the only reason that they have maybe even slightly justification is because of the abortion issue. But really, Democrat policies, they make up for that because they're trying to help people not have abortions in the first place. They're helping, create a world in which abortion is unthinkable. But the problem is that's not true. That's why I don't believe in this moral equivalence between the left and the right, Republicans and Democrat, of saying, yeah, both sides kind of have their benefits, both sides have their cons, and it doesn't really matter. Both sides are doing good things and both sides are falling short. That's not completely true. It is true that both sides fall short. It is true that both sides have policies that we as Christians won't agree with. That is true. But that doesn't mean they're morally equivalent. Democrats are worse. It's just true. Democrat policies are worse. They are worse. They do not stand up for the poor and vulnerable, as we're about to talk about today a little bit. They do not advocate for the least of these. All of the policies that purport to help the poorest and the weakest among us actually don't. That's actually why I wrote my book, Toxic Empathy: How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion. And it is because of this argument that we constantly hear, with the left-wing perspective on social justice, on gender, on race, on immigration, on abortion, that theirs is the empathetic, righteous position that actually helps the vulnerable, and the Republican side is just the fear-mongering side, when actually the progressive position and the policies put in place on each of these subjects actually harm the very people that they say that they're trying to help, as well as everyone else. And so that's why I can't stand this, well, both sides are trying to, do their best, but the left is doing a really good job of caring for the poor. No, they're not. They're actually not. Progressive policies always hurt the most vulnerable, even as they say they're trying to help them. Second sponsor is Range Leather. I love the products from Range Leather. I have a bag from there. I've got a wallet. I got my husband a wallet from Range Leather for Father's Day a couple of years ago. They made us some awesome custom hats that are actually available at alliemerch.com, and so you can see the quality of their work. Their leather goods are just amazing. They've also got jewelry, belts, all kinds of accessories. This is all American made. They're making it from their state of Wyoming. This is a family-owned company. They're Christians. They have the same values that you and I do, and they just really care about craftsmanship, and that is so hard to come by these days. So if you want a gift either for yourself or someone else that lasts while supporting a family-owned Christian American-made company, then go to rangeleather.com/Allie. Check out all of their awesome leather goods, rangeleather.com/Allie, and you will get 15% off any Range Leather product. rangeleather.com/Allie. You've probably been hearing, especially from even pro-life Christians, who say they're considering voting for Harris Walz, because those people are out there, believe it or not. And one example that they're giving for why this is actually a more holistically pro-life ticket is that Walz implemented this amazing school lunch program in the state of Minnesota. And so he is feeding the poor and hungry, something that Christians are called to do. And by the way, Christians are called to do that. We are not called to delegate our responsibility to poor people to the government. Remember, God loves a cheerful giver, not a giver that is giving under compulsion, which is what our tax dollars are doing and represent, but a giver that is giving voluntarily. So let me just clear that confusion up. But setting that aside, let's look at the school lunch program. Was it actually a positive development? Does it actually speak to Walz's Christianity? Is this really an example of helping those who are poorest among us? The truth is, it's not. So let me give you a summary of what it is and why it actually spelled disaster for the state of Minnesota and didn't actually solve the problem at all. And once again, like every progressive policy, it hurt the very people it purported to help. On March 17th, 2023, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz signed the Free School Meals Bill into law. The Free School Meals Program, which began on July 1st, 2023, is a state-funded program that provides reimbursement for a free breakfast and lunch to all students regardless of their family's income. But here's the deal with that. The USDA already funds programs, the National School Lunch Program, the School Breakfast Program, that give free or reduced prices for school meals to students based on family income. There's the SNAP program. We talked about that last week. This is food that is given to poor students at public schools, paid for by by the tax dollars from the federal government. And what did the Harris-Biden administration do with that through the Department of Agriculture? Hopefully you already know the answer because I've talked about this 4 or 5 times. This is such an important story to tell all of your bleeding heart liberal friends who think that they're voting for the compassionate ticket. They said, public school, if you do not abide by the changes to Title IX, which say that sex discrimination is no longer just sex discrimination, but discrimination based on someone's stated so-called gender identity, then you will not get these free lunches. So what that actually means is public school, if you do not allow boys into girls' bathrooms, boys into girls' locker rooms, boys onto girls' sports teams, then you will not receive these free lunches for poor students. So, holding student lunches for poor kids hostage until a public school goes along with this absolutely crazy and dangerous redefinition of gender that allows boys into girls' spaces. So that's what the Harris-Biden administration has done that is easily verifiable. You can look it up. We've talked about it many times. We can link the article in the description again. So I don't want to hear how this is a ticket that wants to feed the most vulnerable. That's not even true. It's not even true based on the record. It's not even true based on Walz's record. So let's look into this lunch program a little bit more to see if it really was as charitable as he says, which, by the way, anything that is tax funded is never charitable. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything is paid for somewhere. The Minnesota program says that it provides free funding for free breakfast and lunches for all children, regardless of family income, who attend a school and participates in the federally funded school breakfast and lunch programs. There is some fine print with the stipulations, once again, that schools had to abide by in order to get these lunches. Minnesota school districts, charter schools, and non-public schools approved for the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program must participate in the Minnesota Free School Meals Program. Essentially, Minnesota, so this is what's happening because every single student is provided a breakfast and lunch, and the parents cannot opt out. So if a parent can afford breakfast and lunch for their child, it doesn't matter. It's going to get paid for by the tax dollars. They're going to be provided with this food anyway. So what is essentially happening then is Minnesota is funding breakfast and lunches for the children of wealthier families. According to the FAQ page on the program's own website, a parent cannot opt out, as I said, of the Minnesota Free School Meals Program and pay for their child's meals. According to online commentary, the quality of food and menu varies by district. I've gotten messages from many of you saying that the portion sizes are so small that it's so gross that it's not nutritious at all. It's filled with all kinds of fake crap, for lack of a better word, that it's wrapped in plastic, and that the kids who actually can't afford to eat that or can't afford to bring their own lunch, that they're left hungry at the end of the day because they are not provided with the food that they need to actually be sustained. And so here's what's happening. By providing lunch to everyone, which obviously costs a lot of money, it costs hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. But by saying, okay, we're going to provide the same lunch to every single person, and in order to afford that, we have to cut down on the portion size of these lunches. So what you are actually doing is you are making sure that poor kids who were already provided free lunches by the federal government are actually eating less now than they were before, in order to make up for the cost of trying to pay everyone now, or trying to feed everyone. Now, why are they providing lunches and breakfast for everyone and not allowing parents to opt out? Why are they requiring schools to provide this food for even the wealthiest kids? They said it is to prevent something called food shame, so that a kid who is poor, who has to have the school provided lunch, that he won't feel stigmatized, that he won't feel othered because of the food that he is eating. But again, kids are just bringing their own food. I mean, they're still being provided with this food, but they're bringing their own food. So that didn't solve the problem at all, because the food is terrible. The portion sizes are too small. No one wants to eat it. That's creating a ton of food waste. And again, a ton of money waste, because you're paying for food that is not actually being eaten. And to make up for that cost, again, you are cutting down on the portion sizes for the kids who actually need the food. Now, legislators in Minnesota have pushed back on this. This is according to The Hill. Universal meals were initially expected to cost around $400 million for 2 years, but budget projections in late 2023 found they'll cost $80 million more over 2 years due to higher than expected participation in the program. And costs are expected to grow by another $95 million in 2026 to 2027. The conservatives in the legislature in Minnesota argue that universal school meals are a colossal waste of money, saying that the program provides food to middle and upper income children whose families can't afford to feed them. Many of the arguments that feeding all kids reduces the shame or stigma faced by lower income ones come down to sad anecdotes. And Jonathan Butcher of the Heritage Foundation said, look, we can care about those anecdotes. We can try to rectify that. But wasting hundreds of millions of dollars and wasting tons of food to feed kids small portions of crap is not worth it. That's not a win. Butcher also pointed to federal findings that USDA programs may be vulnerable to fraud and that the USDA overpaid by nearly $2 billion in 2017 for school meals, largely due to inadvertently giving food to children who weren't enrolled in the program. So that's just saying that these kinds of food programs are very vulnerable. They're very subject to fraud because it's so much money. There's so much waste. It's passing through so many hands. And that it's not actually accomplishing what it purported to accomplish. And that is something to look out for every single policy proposal from progressives. It sounds good. It has good stated intentions, but policies have to be judged by the result, not the stated intention. And that is what it's so difficult being a conservative. It's so difficult, I think, being a thinking person. I was just saying this to my husband, like, life is so much easier if you really just imbibe things that you see on social media and react to them emotionally, and you allow your care, your perspectives, your outrage to be dictated by everything that you see in a headline or anything that's trending on social media, and you just don't question it, and you don't go past the progressive talking points. Like, life is a lot easier that way. But when you're a conservative, it takes a lot of effort, which is another obstacle that we face, by the way, especially in an election year, is that we have to get people to think past the headline. We have to get them to dig past the fancy infographics and what's being said and look at what actually happened. It was Thomas Sowell who first said, you cannot judge a policy by its intentions. You have to judge a policy by the results. So I don't want to hear anymore. Well, Walz said this, Harris said this, they, proposed this legislation. I want to know what it did. I want to know what it accomplished. And that's what you should ask the people in your life. And now when someone presents this to you, that, Walz did this great pro-life thing. That's another tactic, by the way, trying to make everything else pro-life except for abortion. No, pro-life is about abortion. We can talk about the other issues too, but they're not a pro-life issue. They're not an abortion issue. You can bring them back to the fact that this program didn't work. It was a waste. And once again, it actually hurt the very people that it purported to help. Now, Walz is no stranger to fraud when it comes to money that the state is spending, the taxpayer dollars that he is demanding his constituents spend. This is according to the Washington Times. Walz oversaw the worst pandemic fraud in the nation, $250 million stolen from a program to feed kids. Now, this program is not the same as the program we were just talking about. It's different. But it just goes to show that these kinds of programs, again, are very vulnerable to corruption. One program run by the State Department of Education funds free meals at child care and aftercare programs. During the summer, they provide meals for children who get free lunches during the school year. A state audit said that the Minnesota Department of Education missed repeated warning signs that there was corruption going on within the department. In September 2022, the Justice Department charged 47 Somali immigrants in connection with the fraud. The scheme involved the 47 defendants, whom prosecutors say created an umbrella group called Feeding Our Future and then created numerous subgroups that were advertised as bringing food to needy children during the pandemic. The accused allegedly used the fraudulent groups to file for relief funding at mosques across Minnesota. Once they obtained the funding, they reported feeding thousands of children every day and supplied rosters of non-existent children to the government to show their outreach. One such fraudulent feeding center was so brazen that it just copied all the names from a website called listofrandomnames.com. Oh my gosh. And sent that list to federal authorities to claim that it fed the people on the list, prosecutors said. Representative Lisa DeMuth, the top Republican in the State House of Representatives in Minnesota, said the problem rests with Governor Walz. She says 100% of the fraud lands on the shoulders of Governor Walz. We have systemic fraud in the state of Minnesota, and it has not been taken seriously. During pandemic school shutdowns, the second program was tasked with delivering meals to children. Providers seeing dollar signs rushed to the program, and the fraud bloomed. And again, there were warning signs about this. If Governor Walz cared at all about this corruption, he would have put an end to it. But there are so many layers to this. One, Democrats love these kinds of programs. They are notoriously corrupt, and very rarely do Democrats take that kind of corruption seriously. But also with these defendants being Somali immigrants, and there being such a large constituency of Somali immigrants that really the Democrats pander to in that state, I'm sure that played a role in just kind of looking the other way. Feeding Our Future is a nonprofit that prosecutors say helped siphon money to the fraudsters. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. This is not just a one-off. Under Governor Walz's leadership, the state auditor highlighted another pandemic program signed by Governor Walz that distributed $500 million in checks to frontline workers. Up to $200 million of these funds were misspent, including payments made to 290 deceased individuals. Wow. The auditor criticized the state administration for lacking proper oversight and a regulatory mindset, leading to significant fraud. All right, next sponsor for the day is Good Ranchers. Good Ranchers has an amazing deal going on right now in honor of the Summer Games. They're giving you a free gold medal add-on. So when you subscribe, you can add on a plain chicken breast, Angus ground beef, applewood bacon, or wild-caught salmon in every order, in every box for the next 4 years, totally for free. That's up to over $1,200 in savings. You're not going to be able to find those savings at the grocery store or with anyone else. And this is all American meat, by the way. And when you use my code Allie at checkout, you get an extra $25 off your subscription. It is totally and completely worth it. Go to goodranchers.com. Use code Allie for that discount. Goodranchers.com, code Allie. Now, during COVID, speaking of COVID and programs, I mean, he was an absolute nightmare. And there are two examples of that. And just keep in mind, like, that was likely not the only pandemic that we are going to go through. The left got to accomplish so much during that time, and they gained so much control during that time. It's hard for me to imagine that something like that is not going to happen again, and just listen to the kind of leadership that we would be under if so. So while he was governor of Minnesota during COVID, he shut down churches while keeping abortion clinics open for quote unquote essential medical procedures. Walz determined in a May 13th, 2020 executive order that retailers would be allowed to reopen at 50% capacity, but he left religious gatherings specifically capped at 10 people. 10 people. In a March 20th executive order, Walz halted all non-essential medical procedures during the pandemic to preserve medical equipment, but he kept abortion clinics open. All right. I know it might look and sound a little bit different now. That's because we had some technical difficulties and had to do a little bit of a device change there. But I want to get into a little bit more about COVID policies under Walz as governor of Minnesota. So like many Democratic governors at the time, he shut down churches. He closed churches while he kept abortion clinics open. And he actually gave abortion clinics preferential treatment even over hospitals and other kinds of medical clinics because he called this essential care. But he didn't believe that worshiping in church was essential, which is why he said, okay, retailers, he said this on May 13th, 2020, you can open back up to 50% capacity, but if you are a church, attendance is still capped at just 10 people. He also had halted back in March all non-essential medical procedures, but he kept abortion clinics open. That is, of course, because Walz, just like Harris, is completely beholden to Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby. He will do absolutely anything for them. He will sacrifice any of your rights, even your First Amendment rights, on the altar of baby murder. That is who this ticket is. And you've got Christians saying, yeah, I'm going to vote for these people. It's insane. But as I've talked about before, there's a spiritual blindness going on. I'm not trying to say that everyone who's spiritually awake is voting for Trump. Everyone who is spiritually asleep is voting for Harris Walz. We can push that aside for a second and just look at the issues. When it comes to the slaughter of image bearers of God, there is one party who believes in that unfettered so-called right through all 9 months of pregnancy and will sacrifice absolutely anything on that altar. And I will not apologize or caveat when I say that a Christian absolutely should not vote for that ticket. I don't think that who you vote for is what gets you into heaven. I have never, ever said that. But just as a matter of prudence, as a matter of trying to legally protect as many babies as possible, which is one responsibility that we absolutely have as Christians. We don't even have an equivalent issue on the other side of the aisle. You should be voting against this ticket on that and that alone. And it is okay to be a single issue voter if abortion is that one issue for you. If you're like, look, I'm not going to vote for the party that is going to make that as easy as possible through all 9 months, like that is a fine position to have. And they believe in the unfettered slaughter of babies through all 9 months of pregnancy paid for by the tax dollar. Their record speaks to that. So even during COVID, he's saying, sorry, worshipers, you can't even worship together. But yes, you can continue to dismember babies inside the womb because this, he thought, was more essential than Christians worshiping together. Now, thankfully, there were several churches who sued him. There were pro-life organizations who sued him over all of this stuff. And he did have to back off on the capping religious services at 10 people. And it was found to be unconstitutional, a violation of people's religious freedoms. Speaking of freedom, this is not something that Governor Walz cares about at all. And you're hearing from Walz Harris that they are the pro-freedom ticket. Of course, they're not. They are pro-degeneracy and pro-immorality, but they are not pro-constitutional freedoms. And you can see that by something that he created during COVID, which is called the snitch line. So in March 2020, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz implemented a snitch line, a hotline encouraging people to tell on people that they saw violating COVID restrictions. So, for example, if you look at the calls that were given in the 10,000 plus COVID-related related emails that were received during this time, people tattled on others for a, quote, very large gathering of pickup basketball with a lot of observers. And then you had some for people walking their dogs. You had calls for too many people attending church. This is something that Governor Walz encouraged. This was a government program that he implemented in the state of Minnesota while he was wasting tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money. He was also encouraging citizens to snitch on other citizens. If that's not Orwellian, I don't know what is, and I don't even want to think. I don't even want to think about what that would look like on a large scale if he is in the White House with Vice President Harris. He also, of course, encouraged school shutdowns, and in response to criticism about this, because there was such a loss of learning, he, of course, touted this unfair, untrue talking point that kids are resilient. No, kids don't have the words to explain the harm that was done to them. That's what is meant by kids are resilient. Kids can't vote right now. That's what's meant by kids are resilient. I mean, kids suffered irreparable harm in many cases, especially poor kids that he seems to like to throw under the bus in his leadership. And of course, all of this happened in the name of trying to protect the most vulnerable, but he didn't even visit his 87-year-old mother who was having open heart surgery in the hospital in the name of COVID restrictions. Now, as I said, he does everything in service to the abortion lobby. That is what he is going to sacrifice all of your rights on the altar of. Same with Harris, as we've talked about many times. Here is him basically saying, look, my allegiance is to Planned Parenthood. Here's Sut 3.
And my record is so pro-choice, Nancy Pelosi asked me if I should tone it down. I stand with Planned Parenthood, and we won.
of course, when he was governor, he signed a bill allowing abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy. And so that's also why he was chosen by Harris, because Harris has been an abortion radical since the start of her career, as we talked about specifically last time. All right, last sponsor is NetSuite, and this is for you business owners out there. If you don't have one source of truth for all of your numbers and your KPIs, all of the information that you need to run your business, then you need to switch to NetSuite. It's the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform, one source of truth. You reduce IT costs and you cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems. You improve efficiency. That's why over 37,000 companies have made the switch to NetSuite by Oracle. It's extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. All you got to do is head to netsuite.com/Allie. That's net, SUITE.com/Allie. I also want to get into, just very quickly as we close this out, Walz's military record. He is being accused, I think rightly so, of stolen valor, because this is another part of his persona that people are trying to present to say he's just, Grandpa Walz. He's your average guy. He's your middle of the road independent. He's a veteran. He served his country valiantly. They're trying so hard to get those people in the middle. They're trying so hard to get those former Republican voters. That's why she chose Walz, because he's a white guy that kind of looks like he'd be a moderate. Of course, he's not at all. And the fact that he's a veteran, I think that they think that makes him look better. And look, he does have a fun personality. I could see why people like him. He's very charismatic. He's pretty well spoken. I think he's pretty awkward, especially like his interactions with his wife at rallies has been really weird. I think he says inappropriate things, but it's much deeper than that. I think that he's also just a very dishonest person when it comes to something that is really serious, and that is serving your country. He's being accused right now of deployment dodging and stolen valor after videos have resurfaced of him claiming he was a combat veteran, when in fact he never saw combat. The Harris campaign is actually owning up to this a little bit. They are saying that the VP nominee, Tim Walz, misspoke, quote unquote, when describing his past military career. NBC says Minnesota Governor Tim Walz misspoke in a 2018 interview circulated by the Harris campaign earlier this week that included the vice presidential candidate talking about his handling of weapons in war, a campaign spokesperson said on Friday. So here is that example of him apparently misspeaking in SOT 1.
I'll tell you what I have been doing. I've been voting for common sense legislation that protects the Second Amendment, but we can do background checks. We can do CDC research. We can make sure we don't have reciprocal carry among states, and we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
Okay, so many parts of that. You can't say that you are anti-reciprocal carry and that you care about the Second Amendment. That's just wild. That is absolutely wild. That whole thing was wild. But he said that he carried weapons of war, except he wasn't actually deployed. He retired to get into politics in 2005 before his unit would have been deployed to Iraq. And you'll see some people who claim to be unbiased online say, no, he was deployed. He did serve. So let's clarify that a little bit. He was deployed in 2003 during Operation Enduring Freedom. And this led many people to assume that he was deployed to a combat location, when in actuality, he spent 7 months in Italy. A researcher note by a researcher who said that everyone asks to be deployed to Italy. Of course, it's a great location, but that's where he was. And he has implied many times over the years that he was deployed to a combat location when, in fact, he was not. He was a member of the National Guard from 1981 through 2005 when he ran for Congress before his unit would have been deployed to Iraq. I don't think there's anything wrong with him serving in the National Guard. I'm not even sure that there's something wrong with him retiring. But for him to use his military career and embellish it to act like he was in combat, that he carried weapons of war when in fact he did not, that is almost as low as you can get. Joel Berry has been commenting on this. He is of the Babylon Bee, but this tweet is not a joke. He said, the media is trying to report that Tim Walz retired before he knew his unit was deploying, since he retired 2 months before his unit received alert orders to deploy. What they're not telling you is that units also receive something called warning orders much earlier, months, sometimes years in advance. He says Tim Walz knew his unit was deploying to Iraq, which is why he quit. Other people are pointing to a speech that he gave in September 2021. The written remarks literally say that he was in combat. What he actually spoke was just slightly different than that. But his prepared written remarks do say, I had the privilege of serving in this state's National Guard. I stood one night in the dark of the night on the tarmac at the Bagram Air Base in Iraq. Of course, they've had to clarify, no, he wasn't actually there. He also calls himself Command Sergeant Major, CSM. He did serve in that capacity, but he did not retire as that. And so the correct name for himself would be Retired Master Sergeant. Now, you might think that doesn't matter, but in that world, it absolutely does matter. JD Vance, of course, as he should, is capitalizing on this. Here he is, SOT7.
When the United States Marine Corps, when the United States of America asked me to go to Iraq to serve my country, I did it. I did what they asked me to do it, and I did it honorably, and I'm very proud of that service. When Tim Walz was asked by his country to go to Iraq, you know what he did? He dropped out of the Army and allowed his unit to go without him, a fact that he's been criticized for aggressively by a lot of the people that he served with. I think it's shameful.
Yep. I mean, he's absolutely right. He did serve in Iraq as a Marine. JD Vance did. He was a corporal in the Marine Corps, received several awards for his service. And so that's the comparison that we have now. And I really like seeing JD Vance out there so aggressive on this. And he tweeted yesterday, I thought this was good. I enjoyed sitting down with 3 of the major networks today to answer the tough questions any leader should answer. Kamala Harris has done as many tough interviews as Tim Walz has battlefield deployments. And so that's a very efficient way to take a shot at both candidates on the other ticket, as he should. Kamala Harris has not done any hard-hitting interviews. She has barely talked to the press because she doesn't respect the American people. I mean, they think, and maybe they're right, unfortunately, that they can kind of pull one over on everyone. She doesn't have to state her policy positions, which she has not. She has not given an explanation for her comments in the past when she says she's going to ban fracking, when she says that she is going to get rid of all private health insurance. She hasn't given any explanation of those things. She hasn't presented any new ideas. If she has new and contradictory ideas now, she hasn't even had to give any of her policy proposals. It will be the same thing when she debates Donald Trump. She will not be held to account. She will not be pressed on these things, and she knows that. It's very similar to Biden basically running from his basement back in 2020, which I guess kind of worked for him. Kamala Harris thinks that she can just allow vibes to win her the election. Unfortunately, she might be right. I really hope that she's not. I really hope that that is running out and that people are starting to ask questions. Wait, what is my life going to be like when Kamala Harris is president? If you cannot afford groceries now, if things are feeling tight now, it is only going to get worse. If you're worried about the threat of World War III now, that is only going to become more serious under this radical regime of Walz and Harris. All you have to do is dig into their past, dig into their statements, dig into the policies. There's no reason to embellish. There's no reason to exaggerate. There's no reason to lie or mislead about that. Like, their record is really clear. They're just betting that you won't look into it and that you won't think about the policies that Trump actually implemented and supported when he was president that made your life better. We've got to move past vibes. We've got to move past feelings. You've got to look at the policies that actually affect you, your family, your children, your friends, and your neighbors. Okay? I wish that we had time to get into the whole story that I posted about on Instagram that I've gotten a lot of messages about, and that is the story of David Daleiden. He's got new videos that have now been released when he went undercover reporting on Planned Parenthood that involved then Attorney General of California, Kamala Harris, not investigating Planned Parenthood and instead investigating him, the journalist who made the report. A lot of people saying, oh, that's not true. Snopes debunked this. So I do want to get into that. Maybe we'll have time to do that tomorrow. I don't have time to do that today. Plus, without the technical difficulties, we just didn't have time to get into it. But I will try as soon as I can on that. All right. Thanks for bearing with us today, guys. And we will be back here tomorrow.